Demon-Kissed, Chapter 27. I never revealed any outward sign that they mattered to me when we were working together and in possible enemy territory. Hells, I rarely revealed it when we were home and safe, but they knew I cared. All three of us had always lived by the rule, show no weakness to the enemy. Growing up as outcasts of the high court of the unseelie Fae, we'd seen firsthand what showing the enemy a weakness in battle could do to a family a long time ago. We all knew that our weaknesses were each other, and we always had each other's backs, whether we were in battle or at home. But Rose and Roz showed how much they cared for everyone when they were home. I hardly ever showed how much I loved them and cared for everyone else in Delia's merry guild of outcasts and misfits. She had called her family. Lay had given us a place where we fit in, a place to call home, and she had given it to us in the form of a family that was over 4,000 strong. I yawned and stopped walking for a moment in front of my door. I was tempted to just put them to bed in my room and catch a little sleep myself, since I didn't have to work tonight. Cade, take the girls to their room, or drop them off in your own and come back down. I'm afraid Shadow had a mishap on the way here and cannot take your place on stage tonight. I hate that you have to go without any rest again, my friend. Nick's voice said in my mind, sounding both apologetic and irritated. I grunted a tired laugh and shook my head. Figures, just when I think I might be able to rest for just a few hours. Not to mention Rose was supposed to be my partner for tonight's show, and I'd have to call in a replacement. I thought to myself, and letting out a deep, weary sigh, I used a bit of power to open the door of my room. The simple spell cost me a little more of my magic, and I paused in the doorway for a moment to lean against the jamb as dizziness washed through my senses. When it passed, I walked straight to the bed and put both women on it. Grabbing the covers from the foot of the bed, I covered them both and headed for my dresser to grab my outfit for tonight. Gotcha, Nick. I'm already on it. Just give me 20 minutes to get these two settled in my room and grab a shower, and I'll get to work. How bad was Shadow hurt? I thought to him in response. Hells, it wasn't the first time I had gone to work half dead from power exhaustion, and still put on one hell of a show. Shit, I had fought in wars and trained with less. I could do it again if I had to. Clothes in hand, I paused beside the bed and brushed Rosalind's hair off of her forehead, then placed a kiss there. He decided to play with a few bears, Cade, and as you know, bears like to play rough. He will live and heal, however. I know I have been a pain in your ass the last week or so, and I thank you for not taking the opportunity to kill me in my sleep, he said, and I felt him begin to leave my mind. I am glad he wasn't hurt too bad. No problem. I was just sticking to my word, even though you made it very difficult not to be tempted. I sent, and heard his laughter as I left my room and headed for the third-floor stairs. I was sure Nick had no idea how many times I had borrowed his bathing pool to get a quick recharge in the last month, and I was equally sure that he honestly wouldn't care if I borrowed it again. I just wished I knew the other girls in the house better. If I did, then I would know which one would be best suited for replacing Rosalind as my dance partner. They were an integral part of this mess of family I had inherited from my mate, and though I loved them dearly as sisters, I hardly knew them at all. I hardly knew any of the females in the guild beyond what they looked like and what their names were. My sister and cousin were the only ones I really knew. Oh, I knew Shay hated it when people called her a dingo. I knew Ash hated pork with a deep, burning passion. I understood that Anya would never really like me as much as she liked Merrick. I knew Mia was fascinated with my hair and hated to be told what to do when it came to anything in the kitchen. I knew May would kill to protect me. I knew a little bit about all the women in the family through working with them. But I spent more time working with the men in it and knew damn near everything about them. I knew my sister and cousin like I knew myself, because we had grown up together. My thoughts continued to circle around themselves in this same pattern, tying my brain in a knot and firing my temper as I reached the stairs to the 4th floor. Halfway up the stairs, I heard a stair creak behind me and glanced over my shoulder. I paused and looked at the petite, dark-haired woman standing 2 steps below me for a moment, then shook my head and continued on my way. "Are you following me for a reason, Miss Malone?" I asked when I reached the gallery landing. Blessed gods of silence, the stereo was off this evening, and I might be able to bathe without listening to that ungodly, hellish mix Nick ran every day. Erin hadn't answered me by the time I reached the double doors to the bedroom, and I stopped to look at her over my shoulder. She was still standing on the landing and staring with wide eyes at one of the statues of Lay to the right of the stairs. Giving the statue a glance, I could guess why she was staring at it. The marble figure was nude and reclining on a marble bench, one foot planted on it with the leg cocked to the side and the other on the floor. To say it was a highly detailed work of erotic art would have been the understatement of the millennium, and to say anything less would have been an insult. As with all of Nick's works of her, it was like she had posed for him, the details were so accurate and perfect. However, I knew that she hadn't had to pose for any of the works he had done of her over the centuries. The mediums he used to create the works might be paint, stone, and clay, but the images themselves were straight from his memory, and every detail came from his heart and soul. I knew this because I had watched him make damn near every piece in the house. Turning around all the way, I watched the small human woman move her gaze from one image to the next, and noted something close to regret in her eyes, as though Erin knew who the statues were the image of, knew how much loving care had gone into their creation, and was saddened by it. I watched her face as she reached out her left hand to lightly trace the lines of one statue's face, and closed her eyes tightly, a frown furrowing her brow as her fingers moved over the stone. "Oi, Malone," I said loudly after several minutes passed and she didn't move or change the expression on her face. She jumped, dropping her hand from the statue, and her eyes opened to look at me curiously. "If you're done fondling Nick's statuary, maybe you would be kind enough to answer my earlier question?" I said, and crossed my arms over my chest. "What was your question, Kate?" she asked distractedly, and began walking around the gallery. "Were you following me?" I asked again, and she glanced at me. "No, I wasn't following you. Dominic mentioned that he had a sound system up here and told me I could use it if I wanted, so I came up here to look at his music selection," she said, and shrugged a little with one shoulder. Nick had given her permission to touch his precious stereo? I thought incredulously as I watched Erin wander over to the stereo and find the clipboard that listed each CD by number and type of music. I watched her for another moment, then turned and headed through the bedroom doors to the open door of the bath chamber on the left-hand side of the huge room. That was the best word for one of the largest rooms in the house, and I never could bring myself to call it anything else. When I reached the pool, I dropped my clean clothes on a shelf near it, stripped off my blood-soaked ones, and stepped into the pool. Weariness tugged at my mind, and I tried to shake it off as I waded to the waterfall shower at one end of the pool. Stepping under the fall of water, I tipped my head back and just let myself absorb the natural energy it provided for a second, then began the process of washing the blood and other matter from my hair and body. I discovered a few bone fragments in my braid as I released it, and shook my head when I found a part of a tooth stuck in a mostly healed cut on my shoulder. Then chuckled when I remembered that Nick had been more covered in the results of our carnage. Nick hadn't been the only one in that building who had been using more power than necessary on his opponents, and though I found the results disgusting to clean off, I couldn't really say that I hadn't enjoyed thoroughly destroying my enemies with my magic. I suspected that we had resembled a pair of blood-soaked psychopaths when we entered the house, and I had to wonder why Erin hadn't run screaming from the foyer when Nick and I came in. Granted, she was most likely used to seeing a lot of blood by now. Being a hunter wasn't a clean job, after all. But she can't have seen her teammates coated from head to toe in blood and other matter on a regular basis. With the worst of the blood now rinsed off, I reached for the shampoo and poured an ungodly amount in my hand and started scrubbing my hair. Perhaps I should have removed more of the other matter from my hair first, I thought, picking a piece of intestine out of the middle of my thigh-length hair. Or maybe I should cut my hair to a more manageable length. I shook my head at that thought. I was a Dione She-Fay male, and a minor royal at that. I may be disinherited, but I was still of royal blood, and unfortunately long hair went with the whole royal Fay thing. Besides, I'd met plenty of women who loved long hair on a man. Not that I had ever taken one of them up on some of their very explicit offers of companionship, and to be honest, I was never even tempted to. Why settle for a one-night stand when I knew in my heart there was more to be had? Because I'd had more once, long ago, and I was waiting to have it again. I just needed to find the right woman. Those women accounted for a good portion of my tips from the club, however, and I would admit that I flirted for all I was worth when I was working a dance floor, and I did appreciate my fans when I was on stage. "Hey, Cade," I heard Erin call from the gallery as I was rinsing the soap off, and I stepped out from under the falls to answer her. "What you need, Malone?" I called back, and picked up a dark purple bar of soap. I had no idea what kind it was, but it smelled like flowers, and would work to remove the rest of the blood. "What's disco? I know it's an old type of music, but what is it?" she said, and I paused in washing off, one arm up and opposite hand in my armpit with the soap. I blinked, shook my head, and continued washing. What is disco? What kind of question was that? I thought, and snorted. Poor woman. Musical Education 101, First Lesson. The awesome sound that is disco, I thought, and then remembered she needed dancing lessons as well. Disco is one of the best things to come out of the 60s and 70s, young lady, I called. That's what it says on the list, but it doesn't tell me what it is, she said, and this time her voice came from the bathroom doorway behind me. I ducked back under the waterfall and quickly rinsed off, then turned to look toward her. She was leaning against the door jamb, gazing down at the clipboard in her hand and twirling a strand of her hair around her fingers. I stared at her silently for a few moments, and when she looked up from the clipboard at me, I crossed my arms and raised an eyebrow at her. The bathroom was long, and the distance between the doorway and the waterfall pool was significant, but I still saw her eyes when they took a trip down my body. She cocked her head to the side as her gaze reversed course and stopped on my face. I saw a small smirk curving one side of her mouth as she raised one eyebrow in return and ran her gaze back down very slowly, then back up again just as slowly. Nice. Very nice. Now, back to my question. Disco is? She said, looking back down at the clipboard in her hand, and seemed to dismiss my nudity entirely. I wasn't vain by any stretch of the imagination, and half of my body was hidden under the water. But her seeming dismissal of my visible charms pricked at my pride, and I drew myself up to my full 6'10" height. I had no idea why her reaction, or rather lack thereof, bothered me. Was quite frankly too tired to really care, but it triggered a long-dormant streak of Fayan vanity that I'd forgotten I even had, and offended that side of my nature a little. Before you even start the macho, offended male routine, let me just say one thing. I have seen more naked male bodies than you might think in my line of work, and all of them were nice. Yours may look better in comparison, but once a girl sees one, she don't need to see more to know what a guy looks like all over," she said, just as I opened my mouth to speak, and I closed it again, blinking. Well, that certainly puts me firmly in my place, and puts a bit more perspective on her reaction, I thought on a sudden burst of amusement. Chuckling and shaking my head at myself, I ducked back under the falls to make sure all the soap was rinsed off. "No offense really taken. However, you may want to check your reaction with other Fey males. They're more likely to take offense than either Merrick or myself, and will try seducing you just to prove to themselves that they can," I said, and waded to where I had left my clothes. Stepping out of the pool, I grabbed a towel and started drying off. "Been there, done that, and shot the guy who gave me the t-shirt," she said, and I laughed. "Seriously?" I asked, wrapping the towel around my hair, and then bending to retrieve my white bell-bottom jeans. Pulling them on, I waited for her to answer, and when she hadn't by the time I had them zipped, I glanced at her over my shoulder. Her face had a slight blush on it. She was biting her bottom lip, and her gaze was fixed firmly on my butt. "Oi, Malone, I asked you a question. You going to answer it?" I barked, and she blinked. "Has anyone ever told you that your ass should have grade A prime tattooed on it?" she asked, her gaze still glued to my rear end, and it was my turn to blink. "No," I said honestly, and bent to grab my dark metallic red ruffled shirt. "Too bad, 'cause damn, dude, that is one fine ass you have there. And yeah, I shot the last male Fey that tried seducing me," she said as I shrugged the shirt on. "Did you get his name by any chance?" I asked, buttoning my shirt and staring at the wall. I refused to let myself be flattered by her words, even though on some level I was very pleased by them. "Falcon, I think is what he said his name was, before I shot him. Twice," she said, and I turned to look at her. I stared at her consideringly as I finished buttoning my shirt and tapped my pendant twice. I held her green-blue gaze with my own cobalt blue, and began the shift into my heart's blood-colored fox form to finish drying my hair. Erin's eyes widened in surprised recognition, but she didn't go for a weapon as I had half expected. Instead, she smiled and took a step into the room toward me. I stood perfectly still as the change completed, and watched her intently as she walked toward me. Her gait was unhurried, her stride was even, and had a deadly sort of grace. This woman has the grace to be a good dance partner. With a little training and a lot of begging on my part, I could probably convince her to come to the club tonight to help me with my act, I thought as I watched the way she moved, and felt a little excited by the prospect. I'd have never thought to train others in the art I practiced on the different stages at Fantasy, but just maybe, she suddenly stopped 3 feet away from me and knelt in front of me, grinning like an adorable little girl. With that smile she reminded me of our former closest neighbor's daughter. Suddenly a memory from 17 years ago surfaced, and I remembered the little girl's name had been Erin Alicia, and I remembered that she had been taking dance classes in some kind of elite school. At least, that name was what her mother had yelled at her whenever the child had gotten into trouble for playing with me through the fence and made herself late for class. Good gods! It could be coincidence. But what if it wasn't? I thought, and cautiously took a step toward her. Her eyes brightened, but her smile never wavered, and she didn't move an inch as I took one step after another toward her. "Hey there, pretty red doggy. Want to play?" she whispered, and opened her arms in invitation when I was a foot away from her. I stopped moving, and keeping the image of the way I wanted to be dressed in my mind, I quickly reversed the shift. "I'll be damned! It is you!" I murmured, and she nodded as her eyes teared up a little bit. "I know now that I'm grown up that you're actually a fox, but I figured you'd appreciate the irony and forgive the insult," she said, then cleared her throat when her voice came out rough-edged, and gave me a bright, sheepish smile. I gave her a half-smile in return, then stood and offered her my hand. Looking up at me consideringly, her green-blue eyes glittering with tears, Erin took my offered hand, and I gently pulled her to her feet. "Tell me, did you continue your dance lessons after that summer?" I asked, as she rolled her eyes at me. "If you're asking me if I know how to dance, the answer is yes. But if you want me to do anything complicated, like, say, waltz, for instance, no freaking way. And trying to teach me through putting some poor fool's feet in danger just does not work," she said, releasing my hand and stepping back so that she didn't have to look so far up. Ballet wasn't complicated? I thought incredulously. "How about showing you the moves like your teachers did for your ballet classes?" I asked, and moved around her to the sinks. I could see her in the mirrors over the counter, and watched her as I conjured myself a hairbrush from my room. I set to work untangling the knots and trying to get the long, straight, dark red mess into some resemblance of an afro. Erin watched me back for several minutes before rolling her eyes and sighing. "What are you trying to do to your hair?" she asked, coming to stand beside me and setting the clipboard on the counter. "You first," I said, and continued my efforts with my hair. I was failing miserably, and would resort to my magic to fix it the way I wanted it in another minute. I wanted to see if she would offer to help me with it, and I wanted to hear her answer. "Yes, I can learn damn near anything if I watch someone else do whatever it is for an hour," she said. Then, wrinkling her nose adorably, she added, "Now tell me what you're doing to your head, 'cause whatever it is, I'm positive you're doing it wrong." "I'm trying to turn this mess into an afro, and I know I'm doing it wrong. I always do it wrong if I don't use magic to get it right," I said, continuing to try and get my hair the way I wanted it the hard way. "And you're doing it the hard way, why, exactly?" she asked, and climbed up onto the counter, then took the brush from my hand. I closed my eyes in pleasure when she ran the brush through my hair gently, and felt myself smile a little. "You're beginning to remind me of my youngest son, Derek. Though his hair is reddish gold, not blood red, and it's one hell of a lot shorter than yours is, Cade," she said with amusement. I opened my eyes again to a very nice view down the front of her t-shirt as she knelt on the counter in front of me to work on my hair, and I felt my body stir with lust for the first time in centuries. I drew in a careful breath and swallowed hard. Despite what I may have told Merrick a few days ago, I didn't truly believe that Erin was the reincarnation of Delia Fireforge, for more than one reason. Not to mention that the whole idea of rigging your bloodline for a reincarnation was just insane and impossible. But the main reason I didn't believe it was simply because I didn't want to believe it. Leaning back away from her, I cleared my throat, gave her a half-smile, and reclaimed my brush. The reason I was trying to fix my hair the hard way instead of using my magic is simply because, just because I can, doesn't mean that I should, and using magic for trivial self-gain is dangerously stupid, I said, and used a small bit of power to obtain the hairstyle that I wanted. "Good to know, but, Cade," she said, then her voice trailed off and her eyes took on a distant, distracted look. I moved farther away from her and checked my appearance in the mirror. Giving myself a critical once-over, I sighed and shook my head. My complexion was so washed out from exhaustion that my dark blue eyes looked neon, and I resembled a very groovy vampire with my hair done like it was and the style of clothing that I was wearing. Though not a horrible look for me, it wasn't the one I had been going for, and I contemplated using a glamour to fix my coloring for the night, then dismissed the thought as way too vain. "Cade, I know this is a further imposition of your good humor, but take Erin with you to work and keep her distracted, please." Nick's voice sounded in my head, and I closed my eyes. Any particular reason you're asking me to do this, Nick? Or do you just want her out of the house for a while?" I asked, and opened my eyes to glance at her from the corner of my eye. She had a frown on her face, and appeared to be thinking hard about something. "She needs to be distracted from what she witnessed in her mind of what those humans did to Alistair, and she needs to be away from the house for a while. I do not know how he was able to connect with her mind like he did, when he did, but I intend to find out when he wakes, and I will try to help him recover quickly from this," he said, and there was a tone to his mental voice that caught my attention. Nick was angry. Not a "I need to kill everything" angry, but a hurt angry, and I wondered what he had seen in Aaron or Alistair's mind to make him so. "Will do, but I need a bit more to go on here. What am I supposed to be distracting her from?" I said, and felt him thinking about his next words. "Her heart," he said simply after a moment, and I blinked. "That's going to be hard to do, Nick, unless you want me to use a glamour on her," I said. "No, I don't think that would be wise or even work, nor do I believe it will be necessary. Just try your best to keep her mind occupied and off of Alistair," he said, and I sighed. "Fine. However, when I return home in the morning, I will expect you to explain everything, and I do mean everything, Nick. Despite what I have told Merrick and yourself about Lay's idea of rigging her own reincarnation, I do not truly believe that Aaron Malone could be the one she was reborn as," I said, and sensed his amusement. "Of course, Cade. I understand, and will endeavor to explain after we have both had some rest. Now, begone from the house, and show Erin a good time. Have some fun with her at work, and keep her distracted for the sake of all that is holy in this wretched world," he said, and cut our mental contact. I had been watching Erin's face the entire time Nick had been speaking with me, and had seen her expression change from a look of fierce thought to one of pure anger. "I'm supposed to do what?" she barked, and glanced at me a bit sheepishly. I raised one eyebrow at her, and she shrugged, waving one hand back and forth through the air. As I watched her, she chewed her thumbnail a bit, nodded twice, and then rolled her eyes before crossing them. After another moment, she blew out a hard breath and hopped off the counter, then stood with her hands on her hips, glaring at the floor for a second. "I don't suppose you were just told to take me with you to Master Sarcasm's club, were you?" she asked in a tone of voice guaranteed to give a person high blood sugar, and I mentally cringed, wondering what Nick had told her to do. "I was, yes. Do you have a problem with accompanying me this evening?" I said, and saw her cheeks turn pink under the faint tan on her skin. No. I would love to go with you. It's just," she said, and motioned with one hand helplessly, when her voice trailed off, as though searching for the words she needed. "You'd rather stay here and help look after Merrick and Alistair, correct?" I guessed, and she nodded sharply, then looked at the floor and kicked at a red tile with the toe of her boot. "Yes. Merrick is a friend, and Alistair is, I like him, so yeah," she murmured. "Really? I hadn't thought you liked either of them," I said, shrugging, and turned to leave the bathroom. I kept an eye on the mirror, though, and saw her frown in thought as I reached the door. "I guess I never mentioned how I felt, but yes, I like them both and don't think I should leave. But this is Dominic's home, and I did promise to him that I would help out where I could. All I really have is my word, and I won't even have that if I break it," she muttered, and let out a loud sigh. "Then we should get you dressed for your part in the show tonight, shouldn't we?" I asked, to distract her from her thoughts, and her head came up, her green-blue eyes wide with surprise. "Wait, Dominic didn't say anything about helping you with your act," she said. "If I have to take you to work with me, I may as well put you to work, and besides, I need a partner for my routine. My sister was supposed to be my partner tonight. However, she used too much power helping to heal Alistair, and will need to rest for a day or two to recover," I told her, and exited the bathroom. Swift movement and 10-inch platform shoes did not normally go hand in hand, but I'd had to fight in the damn things before, back in the 70s, and I'd learned fast how to move quickly in them. I had just reached the doors to the bedroom when Erin came out of the bathroom at a light run. "Cade, you asked if I finished my dance classes when I was a kid. But you didn't ask if I was any good, or if I would even be willing to be your dance partner tonight," she said, and her tone was irritated. I stopped in the doorway and turned to wait for her to catch up with me. "I already know you can tear up a dance floor, Erin, though I suppose I should have asked if you would grace me with the honor of being my partner, and not just assumed you would. For this oversight, I apologize, and now ask you to come out dancing with me tonight. Vien set nocere vona. You were an excellent dancer when you were a child, and it would be an honor if you would be my partner tonight," I said with all sincerity, then added, "and I have a bit of a challenge for you as well. If you can come close to matching or even beating my overall records on all the floors the club has to offer, I will call on you to fill in for Anya or one of the other floor managers. If you can match my rhythm or match my moves per beat while dancing with me, I will call on you every night I work." The last was a warning of sorts. I was a general floor manager at the club, and I had 10 shows to put on tonight, and we were bound to hit 10 of the 700 dance floors the club had to offer tonight. The first one tonight was in Lucifer's Pit, or the first floor of Fantasy. "What did you call me just now?" Erin asked in a curious, if still a bit irritated tone. "Little Dancer," I said, and remembered it had been what I had called her in my mind years ago. That thought sparked a series of memories. When I first caught sight of the little girl next door, dancing in her backyard through the fence, and heard what she was listening to, I'd been amazed. That kid had been a natural when it came to the rhythm of any sort of beat, and if given enough time to really catch the rhythm, that little girl could fly. She had been listening to Rob Zombie's Living Dead Girl, and dancing ballet to it in perfect rhythm. If I remembered correctly, she had listened to all of her practice music out loud every time she practiced, and had been dancing to acid trance music the next day. I couldn't recall the songs, though, which sucks, because they would be perfect for Lucifer's Pit, I thought. Shit. I need to be there 4 hours early to get set up and do a rehearsal of the routine, I muttered when I glanced at my watch out of the corner of my eye and saw that it was already 4 in the afternoon. "Cade, how often did you watch me dance when my family lived on this block?" she demanded, and her voice was still irritated. I stepped forward and took her hand. "I'll tell you at work, Erin. We need to get going, or there won't be time to get ready," I said, tugging on her hand until she came close enough that I could put my arms around her. "Hold it, Buster," she said, putting her right hand against my chest when I wrapped my arms around her shoulders and pulled her closer to my body. "Trust me for a few moments, Erin. I give you my word that I will do nothing to harm you," I said when she tried to twist out of my arms, and she stilled. "I hate to sound rude, but what is your word worth, Cade?" she asked in a serious tone. "You know nothing of the Fae, do you?" I asked in return, and let her go. "Only what I've read in books and seen from both you and Merrick," she said, and took 10 steps back. I watched her body language closely, noting how she stood with her arms loose at her sides, with her left leg a half step behind her right, and her head cocked slightly to the side. I immediately recognized the way she was standing, and couldn't help smiling a bit. So watching Nick and I spar helped her learn a little, I thought. Then began to wonder what else we could teach her about fighting, among other things, just by letting her watch us as we were doing it. It might prove very interesting. It could also backfire deplorably if we showed her a few of Delia's more innovative killing techniques and she used them on us. Though from the tales Marek had told during the final stages of his 3-month-long recovery from a werebear attack, she had more than a few of her own tricks to be wary of, and I'd seen that her reaction time was scary fast for a human. Continuing to watch her, I noted that her eyes had taken on an almost blank look, as though she weren't really seeing me anymore, so much as she was seeing a potential threat, and I suddenly had the feeling that if I took one step toward her, Erin would move to defend herself. She was heavily armed today, and I'd seen how fast she moved earlier. Though I did want to see what she could do on a dance floor, I had no wish to become a pincushion and ruin a perfectly good outfit. She suddenly took a step forward, and I tried to stay relaxed as I watched her carefully from under my lashes.